that I could do anything I wanted with it. She said it was the best it had ever been. And she said, I yelled at my husband, look what it's done to my thumb. And he'd also lived with her, who had lived with this for years. He says, well, I've already signed up. Nothing can be done about it. So she went and told the naturopathic doctor in Tucson. He's been quite a customer since. Because he's really spread the word. But we've seen some odd little things like this, but she got her testimony out of being mad at her husband.
How would you use it for hernia in the diaphragm?
For what?
Hernia in the diaphragm.
You put, yes, idle hernia. You put it over the entire area, covering at least 3 to 4 inches or more around it. And this is 6 nights a week. But wherever there's a hernia of this type, never eat until you're hungry. This is what starts them off in the first place. Because it's dinner time, you're going to eat, even though you're full. So never eat before you're hungry. And then use this and drink some of it. And we have seen a number of these healed. Same way.
Can't the BF&C be preserved with vegetable glycerin?
Oh, yes. Yes. Dave, do we have the BF&C in vegetable glycerin now?
Yeah, BF&C syrup.
Yes. I thought we did. I can't keep track, but...
But if you're making it up for somebody that you're gonna use it for months on end.
Yes. You see, glycerin is a preservative and also medicinal. But be sure it's vegetable glycerin.
How can you tell?
Know your source in the first place. You see, I didn't know my source. We were getting animal glycerin from South America because we were shut off here in the United States. We couldn't get any more. And finally one day the can looked a little odd, and I was up to the wholesale house to pick up a 25-gallon can of glycerin. And I said, what kind of glycerin is this? He said, regular glycerin. USP is the same as it has always been. But I said, wait a minute, what's it made out of? Oh, he says it's petroleum, which is a coal tar deal. And I said, scratch it. And I left it. And Dave here was lucky enough to line up our vegetable glycerin, thank goodness, in New York.
Shouldn't that be 1/4 of the volume should be vegetable glycerin?
Yes, 1/4.
I made up a batch like that, and I think I put in 1/4, and it went bad on me.
Oh, 1/4 should do it.
It wasn't bad glycerin. I got it from the herb shop.
Oh, it was good glycerin. It was good glycerin. All right.
Maybe I didn't put quite enough in, but
Did you cook enough the water out?
Huh?
Cook it the right amount of time?
I think I followed pretty closely.
You see, there are various ways to make your syrup or your initial tea. There is the regular tea, which is just made up by simmering it and having it ready. Then your 3-power is to simmer it down to 1/2, and your 7-power is to simmer it down 1/4 the original amount. Now with straight bone, flesh, and cartilage, I don't think 1/4 would keep it from spoiling. It would either have to be 3-power or 7-power.
Yeah, it was 3-power.
It was 3-power. Well, 1/4 should have done it. Unless it was awfully hot or something.
Could you share some of your experiences with pilonidal cysts?
Now, what are they?
It's a congenital, the spinal cord in its development develops embryologically into folds that extends from the head, and it seals all the way down to the sacrum. In certain people, that embryologic process malfunctions and doesn't complete, and it leaves like a hole, which has some skin over it, but in essence is an opening into the spinal cavity. Or then you get all sorts of variations where one end may be closed, the skin may be closed, and then you've got a tube in between the spinal cavity and the outside. But they're theoretically incurable, and they usually either cut them out or people live with them.
I would like to try the bone, flesh, and cartilage on that very thing, because we've seen, like the woman with 1.5 vertebrae completely gone, and it grows back in. You can see what might happen there.
See, it might complete the embryo.
It just might finish off the spine. It'd be worth the try. It'd be very economical, worth the try, with no damage done, and whether it could or couldn't.
So you'd say use the same program 6 days a week?
Absolutely. I'd go right at it. We're going into the breakdown on herbs now and talk about their classifications. This particular work we're going into is very essential to the herbalist, because there are certain types of herbs that are used specifically for a certain type of thing. And when we have those well in mind, then when emergency comes, and you may not be where your books are, you may not be where things are that you need right now, but if you've got your memory with you, that's what I like about an individual that'll use their mind. Someone can be left $1 million, and when it's gone, it's gone. But a person who is left with a thought in his mind and a desire, he doesn't need the $1 million. He'd go right on without it and make a better deal of it in the first place. We'll go into the subject of alterative herbs. Alterative herbs are those herbs which will alter the bloodstream from impure to pure. Alterative herbs are the basis of life itself, because without a good bloodstream flowing through the veins, we're lost. This is why we specify, number one, clean out the channels and get rid of constipation, and number two, clean up the bloodstream. And when that bloodstream is pure, you can live on and on and on. And this is what we're after right now. Now there are types of bloodstreams that we expect to clear over a long period of time. And there are some that we've got to clear quickly, or death comes in. And these are in the alterative. Now, we start off with your plantain. And your plantain grows in so many gardens and so many lawns. The Indian calls it white man's footprint, because wherever white man has been, there's plantain. We see the plantain, which is in the yards here, which are maybe 3 or 4 inches long and oblong, and the veins run up toward the end. But these are plantain, a very junior grade to what we see up in the Northwest. You who are from Olympia and up in that section, your plantain there is so big. I mean, immense leaves. And it's just as high a quality. Now, there are two types of plantain. There is the narrow and the broad leaf. They'll both do the same job of healing. So there is no superiority of one over the other. But the plantain is of a family of healers. The history goes back to the mongoose, and when it's out in the wild, it will get hit with a poisonous snake, and the snake will sink its fangs in. Well, the mongoose immediately goes out into the shrubbery or the bushes, and it finds some plantain, and it'll eat up the plantain, absorb it, clear the blood stream up, and when it's feeling its energy, it goes finds that snake. And the snake wishes he hadn't messed around because he finishes the snake off. But that would have been death if he hadn't known of the plantain. There's an Indian down in the southern part of the United States, or was, past tense now. That Indian discovered an ointment for poisonous snakes, rattlesnake poison, or a poison for snakes, and the area many years ago thought so much of him because he had discovered this that they gave him a large tract of ground and a bit of money, quite a bit. The basis of his ointment was plantain, and there is a wonderful plant. You should look over your areas wherever you live, and if you can find some plantain, don't chop it out. Keep it. Just case the joint. have it well staked out, because we need it sometimes when we least expect it. Sometimes it comes to a point where without that aid, we could lose a life. Dr. Nowell, who was like I always say, don't let the baby bother you. I told a lady this. I said, don't let that baby bother you. It isn't bothering me. And she says, no, but you're bothering the baby. We've got here a story of Dr. Nowell. He was my first herbalist teacher, Vancouver, British Columbia. And he was a true teacher. But he tells a story, and it was his daughter that repeated it. He taught his children about plantain, how valuable it is. He and the rest of the family had gone out fishing or something up in the hills on their vacation and left their teenage daughter with the baby at home, or at the camp. The baby was stung by a hornet or something, and the swelling got so bad, this teenage girl was pretty excited about it, not knowing how to get a hold of her family. She had to call back on her memory, and she remembered her dad telling about plantain. So she went out and found some plantain bushes, or plants, and bruised them up and put over the baby's sting, and in a little while the sting was gone and the baby was saved. And this story reminds us of many times in my practice where we have used this. And to assure you that these herbs are not only valuable to know where they are and how to get them quickly, but to know how to preserve them and have some on stock at all times. I was getting ready for church one morning in Orem, where I was living, and I got a phone call. Woman said, "Can you get over here quickly? A boy was stung with a yellow jacket, and he's passed out." And I said, "Yes, I'll be right over," and I got the address, and I rushed out into the yard to get some fresh plantain. Always handy, you know. But it was spring and it hadn't come up yet. There wasn't any plantain. Well, thank goodness I was prepared, and I went downstairs and got me a jar of plantain ointment. I threw it in my bag with the rest of the things I'd collected, and jumped the car and headed over there. The boy was lying there boy about, I guess about 8, 10 years old, out like a light. Pain was so bad that it just conked him out. You have to excuse my technical terms. Might have to look them up. But he was lying there, and so I opened my bag and pulled out the jar of ointment, took a spatula, and took about enough ointment on the spatula to about the size of $1. As I say, not many people know what $1 is today, and probably never seen a silver dollar, but they're about that big around. And I put it right on top of where the sting was, put gauze on it, put a bandage around, gauze bandage, taped it on. I finished, and I said, there he is. And I started to pack my bag, and the mother says, is that all you're going to do? That's all is needed. Boy's all right, he'll be coming to in a few minutes, which he did. And she says, So I just packed my bag and left. I found the story. Within the half hour, he was up and around. By the end of the day, he was out playing ball, having a good time, and no side effect, no after effect. A bee sting, a hornet sting, any kind of an insect sting will oftentimes kill a person. If they have a toxic bloodstream that can't take it, it'll hit it and they'll finish off. So it pays to have this around. There is a wonderful thing about plantain. It and a few more of our herbs are, I like to call them God's eraser. We can erase some of the things we do in life, and he has a great eraser, and that is, supposing you're going out in the wilds or in your own backyard and don't know what the deal is, and you run into poison oak, poison ivy, stinging nettle, if you haven't any help right there, you're scratching and digging flesh for weeks and weeks, and that irritation won't stop. But his eraser is that if you'll stop wherever you've been hit with poison oak, poison ivy, stinging nettle, any of these, stand right there, and within view, within eye's view, you will see either plantain, you will see mullein, you will see hound's tongue, or you will see lilacs. They're right there within view. Get those leaves and bruise them and put right over the area, and there's no more irritation. It neutralizes it now. The most wonderful eraser you could ever get. And in your bags and your packs, when you go out into the wilds, on your walks, it would pay to have some ointment, some tincture, some concentrates with you. Now for each pound of leaf lard, or if you can't get leaf lard, get your regular lard, but have it unsalted. Now don't have salted lard. For 1 pound, we take 4 ounces of the dry herb. In this case, it'll be plantain. 4 ounces. And the lard is, of course, all rendered out and ready. And when it's melted down, and it's a liquid, we drop the 4 ounces of the plantain into the melted lard, and the lard will be on a simmer, never boil, but a low simmer. We watch the 4 ounces of green plantain, dry plantain, and after it's been in that lard long enough, it will change from green to a dull tan. All the chlorophyll and all of the minerals will be absorbed into the lard itself. When this has been accomplished, we strain off the leaves, the herb itself, and leave only the lard. And for each pound of the lard that we have, we put anywhere from 1 ounce to 4 to 6 ounces, depending on the temperature of the area that we are in. If it's a place where it's quite cold, we'll use very little beeswax, an ounce or less. But if it's in a hot area, we may use 4 or more ounces of beeswax, because this solidifies it, makes it so that in hot weather, the lard won't be all over the place running around. It stays into a ointment form. So this is melted, and it is poured into the lard mixture while it is all still hot, after it has been strained, of course. And by the way, in the straining, don't use aluminum. Don't use copper. The best thing to use is a muslin type or stainless steel. But we're better off to stay away from as much metal as possible, and especially your lighter metals that can absorb some of the ointments, which will carry off some of the minerals, so we'll get aluminum and copper poisoning and things of this type. When we have now got the ointment in liquid form, we pour it into small jars or cans. Now we find, now this sounds a little on the ridiculous side, but we find that baby bottles are, that you get baby food in. Of course, you folks aren't ridiculous enough to use that kind of junk for your babies. But nevertheless, you can swap a jar of ointment for a dozen jars to the neighbor next door that's empty, and fill them. And it works nice because they're just the right size for ointment. Just perfect. You fill each one with the liquid ointment, or the liquid, yes, that's the best name we can give it because it's still in the liquid form, and leave it almost full so it has time to settle down a little bit. And when they have become firm, screw the top on. And when the top is screwed on firmly, then turn the bottle upside down so that the lid is down, and dip it into melted paraffin wax. And when you bring it back up, the wax will have sealed it, which makes it possible to keep that ointment for 5, 10, 15 years, longer, because the air cannot get into it, and as long as it's in a dark area where the sunlight can't get to it, in a carton or a box, fine. If you get your dozen baby food bottles in the original case that it was in, works out nice. But please, do one sensible thing. The very second that that ointment is put into the bottle, label it. Label it. How many times I have thrown away boxes of ointments and bottles of tinctures because I didn't have a label on them. And I will not use them unless I know what I'm using. And even as valuable as they were, I'd throw them away. So always put that label on. In the service, while we were practicing, we had a specific rule, and you'll know the rule of checking out the materials that you're going to use on a patient. And you have to analyze it so many times and set it down and analyze it again before you're allowed to take the cap off to use it. And if you don't, you can run into trouble, plenty of trouble. Now, I give you this form of making a very, very simple ointment. Now, you use, instead of the dried, thank you, plantain, you will use whatever herb or combination of herbs in its place, but it's 4 ounces to the pound. Now, you may be using, in emergency, a Vaseline, but if you do, it's your common petrolatum. Don't use the the kind that's already got ingredients in it. Have it very plain. But we prefer not using that. Anhydrous lanolin, which is very fine for ointments, is good. There are many ways that we can make up ointments, and in our book you will find some ways in making up an ointment that it takes, thank you, 12 to 14 hours to make up a batch. Our black ointment is an example. And by the way, the reason we call it black ointment is because it's black. That particular ointment, it's a tedious one to make up because there are so many ingredients, and it has not only the lard but the mutton tallow, and it has the oils in it and various things, but it is a powerful ointment. It is one that will do miracles if it's used for all types of infections and for poisons, for bites and for stings. It has been used worldwide now for skin cancer successfully. We've had people fly into us as far as 1,500 miles to stay in a motel while we took care of them and got rid of their skin cancer by teaching them the way to feed themselves internally and put the ointments on externally. And we have seen wonderful things happen with it. There are many types of ointments, and we will discuss some of them, but your plantain ointment, always have that on hand, because many people are allergic to stings, and if you've got your ointment here right now, it can be used. The plantain is for deep infection also. I remember one of my early cases working with plantain. Dr. Nowell had taught me in school how great it was, and I had never had an opportunity to use it. Well, I had now opened up practice in Olympia, Washington, and we were there on East Bay Drive, and a man came up to the door, knocked on it. His arm was out like this. And he said, "I want some help." And I said, "Well, it looks like you got a bad case there." The hand was swollen twice its size. He didn't have a sleeve on, it was bare. Red streak up, big ball under the arm. And he was there, and I said, "Why did you come to me?" I was new. I was still a little suspicious because I've been #1 on the 10 wanted list for so many years that even at the beginning I was dubious. Why did this fellow come to me? Well, he said, "I would have gone to my family doctor, but a friend of mine got poisoning like this and went to the same doctor, and he's only got one arm now." And he said, "I thought I'd come and try you." All right, that was good enough. I took him out onto our lawn on East Bay, and I said, "Do you know what those weeds are there?" "I ought to." Before this happened, he said, "I was digging them up. It's plantain. Boy, it's a pest." And I said, "Well, it's a blessing for you. You're in a condition where you can't dig them yourself. Have your wife dig up a number of these plants, wash them, bruise them thoroughly, and put over the wound." Now, what had happened, he'd let a chisel slip. He was a carpenter, and opened up his hand. Not being able to lose an hour's work, this was during war years, why, he got a rag on there and bound it up and stopped the bleeding. But he got infection. And when he came to me, he was poisoned like a poisoned pig. It was a sad case. And so I told him to make up the plantain as a poultice. Now, poultice is using the whole herbs. And put right into the area. Put it right over the wound. And to keep that plantain poultice on there moist. Not to let it dry out, but to keep it moist. There was plenty of leaves, so they didn't have to worry about it. And put it on there and bind it up. So that's all it'll take. Says, that's great, thanks. I'll be back in a couple of days and see you again, pay the office call. He was back, swinging that arm, away he went. He was afraid he was going to lose the arm. Now it was healed. And it had healed so quickly, he was astounded, and so was his family. But that's all it took. We've had so many of these cases. I remember a young lady up in the Olympia area. Her parents ran a large smorgasbord, and they were quite popular people around there. Well, this girl had cut her foot open with a seashell, and her leg was double its size. And when the mother called me, the girl had passed out from pain. And I told her to go out in the yard and get the plantain leaves. Well, during this time, I was still with the Army. I had my dispensary there, and I was living off the post and taking care of a few patients. In the meantime, we were at a point where